Welcome back to What's Up WID, the World Institute on Disabilities podcast, where we discuss what's up in the disability community with activists and advocates across the globe. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ashley Pumsa. So last week, I had an incredible conversation with the amazing Maryangel Garcia-Ramos. Maryangel is a Mexican disability activist who is the founder of the nonprofit Mexican Women with Disabilities, also known as Mujeres Mexicanas con Discapacidad. She represented Mexico at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2017, and she's really just an all-around amazing, intelligent trailblazer of a woman. Maryangel and I spoke about disability representation in the media and really the lack of authentic, nuanced representation that we've become accustomed to. So today's episode is definitely, without a doubt, one that I know that you'll enjoy. I'm so happy to have you as a guest today to chat a little bit about disability representation in the media, a subject that I know that you've been super vocal about in the past. My first question for all of our guests is always, how are you? How are you feeling?
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for having me on this show. I'm really excited to be able to speak about these really important issues that we see globally, right? It doesn't matter where we are in the world as persons with disabilities or activists for disability. We have basically the same, similar inputs, which are really interesting to see. I'm doing great over here in Mexico. I'm Mexican. I live in Mexico. It's very hot, so it's been really intense, all these weather changes. A lot of work over here, but I think I'm in good spirits, and also the stress, the overall world stress is kind of reducing a little bit with everything that has to do with the pandemic. Every day there's a little bit more a feeling of getting there, right?
Exactly.
It's usually very different for countries like the United States or countries in development like mine or others that we're still not there. But every day is a little bit more of hope. We see a little bit more of hope, so that's good. And I'm doing great, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. I really am. So I know that a couple of years ago at a panel about women in television, where I know the president of Paramount, and there were also executives from Warner Brothers who attended that panel as well. You called out those panelists for not including people with disabilities in their TV shows. I love so much that you did that. Why did you think, and why do you still think that disability representation in TV, film, and in the media tends to be so lacking?
So I think, for a really long time, for a lot of years, we've been carrying this narrative around this really negative narrative around disability, right? For years, for example, and we don't talk about it that much, and we just kind of in our ableist systems, we just kind of accept it and normalize it. So if we go back a little bit of history, if we go back to, I don't know, maybe World War II, where Hitler, besides, the Holocaust, which is one of the most horrible moments in the history of mankind, when Hitler and his team killed a lot of people, especially Jewish people, they were also there was a big genocide around people with disabilities. 145,000, disabled people were killed because they were not good enough. There's always this narrative around we're this broken beings, not good enough. So it comes to the fact that when they talk about us in government, in public policy, there's always been this negative narrative around us, or this completely opposite inspirational porn. We're just here to inspire those who have all their abilities, and that's all the use that we have in the world, right? That's our existence. Is this kind of, disastrous thing. And so since we have those narratives, it's really hard to understand that we have those narratives, and also we lack representation in different areas of society because of the ableist systems that we have. For example, here in Mexico, people with disabilities, their average year that they can study is between 6th grade and 7th grade, right? 22% of people with disabilities in Mexico cannot read or write, for example. Most people with disabilities in Mexico and Latin America live in poverty. So the system doesn't allow us to be a part of that. right? Because it's not accessible, but also because we're not part of the design and decision making on that, right? On companies, or on government, but it's like a vicious cycle, right? Which was first, like the chicken, like the hen, like the chicken, the hen, or
the chicken or the egg, right? Exactly.
It's like this vicious cycle. And when it comes to content, this is the time that for the very first time in a long time in the history of mankind, we have access to creating our own content and creating, telling our own stories. And the thing is, we haven't been able to tell our own stories. When they've talked about us, we haven't been part of that design or that conversation. They've told our stories without us. And when we see stories about people with disabilities told on TV or told on movies, they're portrayed by people who don't have a disability, which are amazing actors. That's not the issue here. But it's about, claiming or clapping for people who don't have disabilities to act like someone who has a disability and seeing how amazing and admiring their life is. But in real life, they don't care about us. So it's something that hasn't been seen as sexy, right? Or as something that could sell, or that's something that people could be interested in because of this narratives. And what I think to this day is that there's a lot of amazing stories that come from people with disabilities, especially women. And I would say non-binary people with disabilities. There are just amazing stories, I would say, in regarding to women that we haven't told. We haven't told our own stories. And the little stories that we see around Netflix, they're like about men with disabilities or white people with disabilities mostly.
Yep.
It's about, seeing that there's this broad, part of the population that we haven't explored the stories. And what the studios need is stories. They need new stories. They need to get to more people. They need to, do things that we haven't told, tell stories that we haven't told before. And it's something that they haven't realized, most of them. And also the representation in not only, acting, which would be, which is very important, but it's about acting. It's about writing the stories, and not necessarily stories with disabilities, but from the perspective of persons with disabilities, for example. And when we talk about media and news outlets and the way they speak about us, it's still very existentialist, very inspirational porn, making, talking still about all of these stereotypes that they're told about us, right? Yep. But we don't tell, when it comes to media, we don't tell the really hard stories. We're not telling that, in COVID, people of color or disabilities had it the worst when it comes to COVID, and we do not talk about this. And in Latin America and Mexico, we're not even talking about how people with disabilities are not part of the people who should get the vaccines first. Never happened, and it's still not happening. So those are the things that, when it comes to injustices, we don't even raise our hands on those stories. So I think we need to be more present, and we need to keep on raising our voices as part of the disabled community, to be able to tell those stories by our own perspectives.
Absolutely. Yeah. You touched on so many amazing things. The first thing is that, the idea of, like, specifically, I don't know if you're familiar, if you heard about this story. I think it happened like maybe last year. There is I believe she's an Australian singer. Her name is Sia. Yeah. And she made this movie about, like, autism. However, she said that she was going to cast, like, an autistic child as the lead, but she said that she couldn't because the set didn't work for the child. So she ended up casting a non-disabled person. And it's just like, why are you not making the set accessible for someone who is autistic versus,
and
like,
why
I just
would
don't
you want to
understand
tell
that.
And why would you want to tell a story about someone who is autistic without contemplating what it would require to tell a story about someone who's autistic? Then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's about that. It's exactly that. It's about, like, we want to go and tell the stories about people with disabilities, which are very inspiring, and it's amazing, and people should hear about this, but you don't involve them in the process. So why would you be telling this story? Like, what's the point, right?
And they're not involving them because maybe it's uncomfortable for them.
Of course.
And instead of, making the set comfortable for the person with disabilities, it's just like, okay, we're just not going to include them at all. And
yeah, because it's more complicated. And actually they accepted. She said it that way, right? It's uncomfortable, it's more complicated. But since it was more complicated, then that's why I decided to just cast this girl who also in her performance, again, there's nothing against actors, right? Without disabilities or and she's an amazing Maddie. She's an amazing dancer, and she was on her videos and everything. But also, like the portrayal of the person, like seeing the perspective of people with autism, seeing the portrayal of what they saw in the movie. They were like, did they even consult with people who are part of this spectrum? Did like the experiences and everything around that? And it's not necessarily her total fault, right, on her performance, but it's about the whole system around that. Since
exactly
from the moment they say yes to the movie, from the moment that it's like, who is being not a gatekeeper per se, but who is actually making sure that this is something that will represent what it will want to represent. And also because the narrative was, she wanted to tell the story about these people. So what she wanted was her main audience or target was who? People without disabilities, or was it people with disabilities? Exactly. And if it was, then it makes no sense. Wouldn't you want the project to be successful? Of course you would, right? So it makes no sense, and it happens a lot. We see it a lot in everything, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think right now there's a single television show on TV, like a single show on television where there is an actual actor with disabilities who's playing a person with disabilities. Not that I'm aware of, not in the mainstream anyways.
I've seen it, but I think it was a show. I'm not sure if it got canceled. It was called Speechless. And it was like this guy who couldn't speak. He had a physical disability. Her mom in the show was Minnie Driver. It was an amazing story. And he actually couldn't speak. He was like on an electric wheelchair, etc. Other shows like Special, he has autism, but the actual actor doesn't. There's another one on Netflix that it's called. No, it wasn't Special. Special is. I'm sorry, I'm mixing it. Special is this one about a guy who has cerebral palsy who's also gay, and he tells the story. He wrote that story, but it's like one of the first stories that's like written by his experiences as being a gay guy, right? And also having cerebral palsy and his experiences through that. And it's funny, but it's the only ones. Other than there's a study that they did in the United States about content that, I think I don't have the number in my head right now, but it's like a super tiny, percentage of people with disabilities are involved in the writing, in the production, in that, right?
Yep. That was my next point, that people with disabilities need to be involved, not only as actors, but in the writing, in the production, directing, as consultants. Like that is so, so important in all facets of the content being created, for sure.
Yeah. Making sure that that nothing about us without us from the United Nations about disability happens. Of course, they cannot tell a story about us without us. It makes no sense, because what will happen, what Sia did, that's what will happen, right?
Yep.
And it's not that it wasn't coming from a bad place. It's just that it doesn't work. It doesn't portray the reality of it, which was the initial goal of it. If you wanted to say, I'm going to portray something that's not real and it's something has nothing to do, but I don't know, something super artistic and weird, and people feel like, oh, okay. But if the narrative was, I want to portray the reality of how they live and the experience, then it doesn't. So it has to do with the decision making from the very first place. If the studio is someone who says yes, who's the gatekeeper to say this show goes, we're going to invest in the show, we're going to spend our money on this show, and then fail. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants the return of the investment, right? And because it's a business in the end. So it's like, how do you make sure that this actually works? It actually gets to broader audiences understanding. And at the same time, they're very responsible for this transformation of negative narrative around disability. In Mexico, we have it, and we see it a lot in telenovelas. If you've ever seen a telenovela in Mexico and Latin America, telenovelas are like this really big pop culture icon on on our lives, right?
Yep.
And every time they still talk about disability, it would be a drama if we saw it in the US. But in Mexico, it's still, it goes like, The other day, like, I don't know, like 4 months ago, still in the midst of the pandemic, there was this scene on a telenovela at night, like a prime time, right? And this guy, he's a very big villain, right? Super big villain. He did like the most horrible things to his family and everybody, like the worst thing you've ever seen, like super dramatic, right? And at the end, the ending is that he has an accident and he is not able to walk, and he's not able to walk or move his arms, barely speak. He's in a wheelchair and he's in jail. And then somebody says something around, he got what he deserved.
Wow.
And we saw this on
Wow.
on the main schedule where everybody it's still a thing, and a lot of people still watch TV, like, cable TV or like open TV, and they see telenovelas. It's a big thing over here.
Yep.
And they're saying, so I actually taped that, and I said, like, so what you're telling me is that the worst thing that could happen to the worst person that you've known, right, on this story, what's the worst thing that could happen? It's not jail. It's not paying for his crimes. It's being disabled. It's not being able to walk. So what you're telling me is that people who already have those disabilities is like, it's a curse. You deserve it. It's the worst thing that could happen to you. And if we still keep pushing those narratives, and I ask, and we touched base with the studios that produced it, and we were like, so clearly there was no one when they were writing this who was like, excuse me, is this okay? Because there was no presentation around that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, it will be amazing that there were more people with disabilities as consultants, because there is talent that they can consult not only on disability issues, but on other issues, right? From their very own unique perspective. And it's not the same of what a deaf person will tell you than someone who has a physical disability, or someone who has a physical disability that is part of the Black community, or people of color, or part of the indigenous community, big indigenous communities that are here in Mexico. You never know. Or so I think it's more of a, how is it that they don't understand to this day that there are some things that in the decision-making session that they're sitting there, someone would raise their hand and voice or said, like, I think this is not okay. It was 30 years ago, because we didn't notice and we didn't question much. But to this day, 2020, no, we cannot say that. Like, no, we could, he could be on a wheelchair on the story. Yeah, it could. But the narrative around that saying he got what he deserved, these are the things that keep happening. And it's so normalized in our ableist systems and our ableist narratives that we don't see it unless you're part of the disabled community, probably, because then people won't see it, and we need to keep pushing this.
Yep, exactly. And I think there's a lot of people who would make the argument and say, oh, it's just a TV show. Like, what's the big deal? It is a big deal because the media has such a profound effect on the way that we view the world, nature versus nurture, right? The way that we see things on TV and films, on the music that we listen to, it really affects our perceptions, especially if you don't belong to that group. Like you said, if that's not your lived experience of having a disability, then of course that's going to be your perception that he got what he deserved. And it's terrible.
Completely. And I don't think content is innocent at all. The other day, somebody was telling me on Twitter, Twitter can be a really dark place, but they were telling me, like, how is it that, people now complain about everything, and we cannot say anything because everybody would get offended by everything. So this is the over here, they call it the crystal generation, right?
Here there's cancel culture. That's what.
Exactly. And it develops into that. Everybody can get canceled for something they said 30 years ago. And we're all deconstructing ourselves, and we're not the same person that we were 30 years ago, which is true. I understand that, right? But what they were saying, like, we cannot say anything. Inclusive language over here, which is a very big deal, because in Spanish, we don't have neutral language like it is in English. We have it as masculine or feminine.
Right.
We have it neutral. So it's been a very big discussion around Spanish, right, around the world. And so all these things, like, people complain a lot about that, and they were telling me, like, it's so hard. Like, it's so hard. We cannot say anything. I'm like, all the time, like, tiptoeing everything, because we cannot, like, there's nothing I say that it's not going to offend someone. And I think we're very weak now, and we used to be stronger and more, like, resilient back then. And I kept thinking, and yeah, sometimes I in my own perspective, yeah, sometimes people complain about things that I'm like, really? Also yes. But at the same time, I understand. And to me, it's just like, it's not that we were more resilient back then and now we're not. The thing is, now we have more access to content. We're
Yep.
talking just about content, right? And that's why content is cynicism. Because this is the very first time we have access to content, seeing it, creating it, talking about it, right? That we didn't have back when we didn't have, like, not only internet, but these platforms that allow you to do so, right?
Social media.
Twitter, whatever you want, right?
Yep.
And to me, it's just like, no, I think people are questioning themselves more than we used to in the past. Our parents, for example, or in generation of our parents, and obviously it depends on culture as well. They didn't question my grandma, for example. My mom would never question my grandma. This is what you do, and like, yes, mom, this is what I will do, because that's how they were told. In machismos or everything to do with gender, and then and gender roles, and we didn't question those things, right? And a lot of people came, paving the way for us today in the disabled community, in the LGBT community, to help us question a lot of things. And this is the moment where we're questioning things, and I don't think we're weaker. I think this time we have access to different perspectives to make our own perspective. And it can be very dangerous as well, right? Because you understand and you deconstruct yourself, and we can be better than we were 30 years ago when we used to call someone a name or a particular way of a word. And to this day, like, you're like, okay, I learned from it. And that's why cancel culture is very dangerous, because we're all evolving, right? But it depends on where it comes from. But at the same time, it's about, understanding that with that as well, we are opening the gate, of course, to more speeches that come from hate, right? Or from racism or ableism, or because of the access we have to information, the access we have to, and it could be fake information as well. So I think it's something that we need to analyze more. But we tend to be very, I know people, for example, people are sharing articles that they don't read just because they look like a certain way. And now Twitter has to tell us, do you want to read it first? Like, you would be like, yeah, it's obvious. But no, it's not obvious for many people, right? It's like, are you sure you want to share this? Just read it first. So I don't think content is innocent. And I think we're very exposed to a lot of opinions from podcasts, from everywhere you look, there's information. You get on Twitter and you're going to be like, there are really good days, and there could be like very dark moments. You're like, why is everyone complaining? Why is everyone so mad? Why is this so dense? Why is it so? And it's understanding. It's understanding that we're all vulnerable to this. And as you said, like, there is a big responsibility in content and in media and the way that we tell stories, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think on the subject of, this cancel culture debate, society is progressing, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that we're getting to a point where we're calling out racism and ableism, homophobia, transphobia. It's a good thing. And I think that we need to embrace that instead of wanting to go back to the past. You can't turn the page without reading the page, so that's really, really important. Absolutely. Yeah. And you touched on this already, the idea that there are so many stereotypes that we see when we see disabled characters in the media, whether they're inspirational or they're villains, or, they're succeeding despite their disability. Why is it so important that we see accurate, nuanced displays of disability in Hollywood or in the media?
You know what I think? I think sometimes when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we talk about boxes, right? We talk about disability, we talk about LGBT, we talk about women, we talk about, I don't know, Black people, which whatever that means, because in the end, it's just like, there is no one single story about anyone in this, particular boxes. So I think it's important to understand that there's no one single story about disability. There's a lot of different stories and a lot of different perspectives. And it's important to tell it how it is. There will be people with disabilities that are really proud of their disability, right? That they will be proud of the community that there's around it, that they won't even consider being, for example, being deaf a disability. It's a part of a culture, for example. There's some deaf people who consider it that way, and it's valid. And it's a very valid story, and it's a very valid perspective. But if there's someone who's not okay with their disability, and one day they want to walk again and they want to see again. It's a process, a very own particular process that they're living through because of the ableist systems that they are, but it's still a valid story. So I think it's very important to make these stories come from the people that are living it, because that way I think it will be easier to define what is a story and what is a stereotype, because the stereotypes are mostly created to, the stereotype stories are mostly designed or created to create a feeling, right? I want to create a feeling so that and we're usually used as props, right? We're always the sidekick, right? We're never the protagonist of our own stories. These are the very first times that we've been seeing, disabled women and the covers of beauty magazines. We were never considered beautiful. And the same as race. Like, there are a lot of issues that, we've never been considered beautiful because we're these broken beings, right? And we, since I can walk, since I can look, since I can see, since I cannot hear, I would not deserve to be called beautiful. I would not deserve to be called powerful. I would not deserve to. So the first time that we're seeing this, it's just like, okay, this is a story. It's not all of the stories, but it's a story. And it's important to see ourselves because, when I was young, I wish that I could have seen a Barbie in a wheelchair. And now I'm seeing it that I'm older and I'm like, this is amazing. This is amazing because we can be whoever we want to be, not despite our disability, but with our disability.
Absolutely.
If we keep on talking about this, narratives that say you don't let your disability define you, or somebody told me that one day, like, it's amazing that you don't let your disability define you. And I get where they're coming from. They're trying to tell you, like, you don't let that the limitations of the world or your own or ableist systems, stop you from doing what you want to do in the world. And I get it, and it's beautiful to, it's a beautiful thought, but in the end, it's a lie.
Yep.
Because disability does define not my value, because I'm worth just the same as any other person, walking or not walking, we all have the same worth, right? So it's about human dignity and about our human rights, and it has nothing to do with my worth. It's more of it will be a lie to say it doesn't define me, because it does define the actions that I do every day. If I'm going to take a shower, it's a different process, and it will define the times that I take, the way that I do it. If I'm going to travel, if I'm going to, go and have a job interview, if I'm going to, try and reach, to study, or it will define my processes and the way I live. So erasing this history of disability, it's erasing my culture. It's erasing the culture that we have around disability, that we've been able to be. The other day also somebody told me, like, I'm amazed how disabled people are like the original hackers. They developed this amazing capabilities to hack the system that wasn't built for them, which, in the end becomes their competitive advantage. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. We are the original hackers. We're hacking the system every day because it doesn't work for us. And it's something to be proud of. Yeah. But then I kept thinking, but why? Why should I be hacking the system? Why should the system just work for me?
Exactly.
Like everybody else, well, almost everybody else, right? And I could be a part of that. And yeah, it's good that we develop these capabilities, but in the end, is this the best way to develop them? Like, why doesn't it work that way for us also? And we understand that. And so, yeah, it's about taking this inspirational, porny, existentialist, narrative around that, and start looking at it as not one single story. There will be different stories.
Absolutely.
Someone who's deaf in Mexico and someone who is deaf in Chicago probably will tell you a different story, right? So if they're a man or a woman or a person or whatever, like, it will be probably a different story. And even in the same community. So there's a lot of amazing things to be told that I think we're studios and decision makers and storytellers, there's an opportunity that they're missing. Because it's amazing. It's a broad spectrum of stories and, business that will come out of that.
Yep. The disability community is definitely not a monolith. There is so many rich stories to be told. And that statement that you said that someone told you, the idea that your disability doesn't define you, that reminds me of when people say, I don't see color. That statement, that's exactly what that made me think of. Like the idea that we can't exist as people of color. We can't exist. We live in a racialized society. We live in an ableist society. Mm-hmm. So we can't exist in a society without every day knowing that we are people of color, that you are disabled. You know what I'm saying? So the idea that your disability doesn't define you or your color doesn't define you, it very much does because of the systems that we exist in, whether we like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Definitely it does. And it would erase your history, your culture, it's like, why would you erase that? And you understand where they're coming from. They're like,
right.
I'm trying to tell you that I'm not racist.
They mean well, but at the end,
exactly. You're like, but even just saying it does have a sense of racism that you don't understand that's internalized as well. So Absolutely. It's very important. Yes, definitely. And obviously, I've heard other activists saying that it's very tiring to educate everyone, right? Mm-hmm. It's very tiring why should I get that role? Like, I just want to live and I don't want to keep on educating. And I understand if people don't want to do it, because you have the right to say, like, I'm sick of trying to educate every white person around this, right? I'm still trying to educate, right? And I get it, right? But in the end, it's just like, I think it can be very tiring, of course. But I think we need to continue, and I think we need to be a little bit more understanding of the collective power that we have as disabled people. I think there is a big area of opportunity there with us in the world. I see it in Mexico and I see it in other places, of us uniting as a collective force, because we are a very important political power and we're not seen that way. But we're 1/4 of the population in the world. So don't tell me that if we call them minority, like we're huge, right?
1.3 billion people are disabled globally.
I mean, put them in a line. Like when you go to the bank and you do a line, put them in a line. Put us in a line and see if we're a little bit of like there's a lot of us. So it's just like, we need to understand the power that we have. And sometimes I think we don't, because of the ableist system that, keeps us in the don't race, stay there, like, and we have a big power. And if we do it collectively, it's not that we have to go and educate every single person. I get it. I get if someone is just like, I'm sick of this, right? Mm-hmm. But we need to be together to make our statements and keep on pushing what we need to push, and especially with a very intersectional perspective. To me, that's key to understanding our different powers within a community.
WID is currently seeking people with disabilities to evaluate the accessibility of products and services offered by various companies. During our sessions, participants are given a list of tasks and asked to provide feedback as they attempt to complete them. WID offers both virtual and in-person sessions, and you will be paid for your time. So if you're ready to help make products and services accessible to people with disabilities, here's your opportunity to make that happen. Fill out an application to become a user tester today by visiting our website at www.wid.org/user-testing-application. I want to discuss your personal experiences as a Mexican woman with a disability. Can you speak about both culturally and socially what your experiences were like growing up and what they still are now?
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you, Ashley. I mean, in my case, I wasn't born with a disability. When I was 13, I didn't have an accident or anything. My back started to hurt, and I was a dancer, and I did a lot of sports, and so my back started to hurt. And then one day, it was hurting so bad. And what happened was, in my case, that I had a neurological thing around my around my spine and whatever, and it ended up with an operation, and it ended up with me becoming a person with disability in a wheelchair without me being able to move my legs. And then I continued to experience the world now from the vision of having a disability. Mm-hmm. And to me, I've always said it in the first place, obviously being a woman, a Mexican woman, Latina, no? In Mexico, and having a physical disability, I am, on a place of, we're like the most intersectional discriminated group in Mexico, women with disabilities, and we are women with disabilities in the world. We're like 10 times more um, likely to live sexual violence and gender based violence. So it's just like a difficult place to be. But I've always said, like, and I speak from my privilege. In the end, I've never been a rich person or anything, right? But from the privilege that I've had the opportunity to study, to have a master's degree, to have light, running water, and food every day in my home, which is basically not. I'm not uh, the average person with a disability in Mexico. So I've understood that, and I've understood the responsibility that comes from that. And then for a long time, I felt I was the only, with my friends, I was the only one with a disability. And then when I kept on uh, meeting other people and meeting other groups, and then that's when I saw the importance of making tribes and understanding other experiences with disabilities and other women with disabilities. So my work has been, right now I lead the Diversity and Inclusion Office for Tec de Monterrey, which is like the biggest private university in Mexico and Latin America. It's huge. It's really huge. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I've been an activist and a consultant and speaker on these issues. But I'm also the founder of the Mexican Women with Disabilities Organization. And we decided to do that like 4 years ago because I understood the power of, yes, we need to talk about disability, of course, and we need to be a strong force and always bringing disabilities issues to the table. But we need to talk about gender and disability in that intersection, especially when it comes to women. Mm-hmm. And nobody was talking about it. And I understood the privilege that I had, having being able to be in different platforms like the United States, the work that I have to this day, the places that I've been able to raise my voice and be and talk, and even me speaking English. It's a privilege coming from speaking 2 or 3 languages, coming from, this country. And obviously speaking English has opened doors. Right now I'm talking to you, right? So it has opened doors that a lot of people don't have that. So to me, it was like, well, we need to find ourselves as women with disabilities. And we need to talk about the issues that nobody's talking about. Violence. If we want to talk about menstrual health, if we want to talk about sex, nobody talks about that to us. We don't talk about sexual and reproductive rights because of machismo and patriarchy and all the systems. But at the same time, ableist systems that, we don't even see it. Women with, disabilities we don't even talk about it. It's not even on the table, right? When we talk about our ability to decide, for example, in the case I'm talking about Britney Spears right now, which has been publicized because she is Britney and I love her. She's been my queen since forever. But there's a lot of people who have been going through the same things.
Yep.
With their legal capacity and with their rights and their reproductive rights, but we're not talking about it. And it comes to women with disabilities.
Because they're not celebrities. As much as me too, Britney Spears growing up, she was my queen as well. But I feel that this movement, I worry that it's less about disability justice and more just about fandom, because I don't necessarily see that same energy being directed towards people who are marginalized, people who are poor and have disabilities. I don't see that. That's my concern, with it. Mm-hmm.
Completely. And obviously it opens the door for conversation, which I think is amazing. And I mean, because it's happening because it's her, and even her with all the privilege that she's living this, it helps us to ignite conversations around what happens when you're not Britney, what happens when you're not white, what happens when you're right. Mm-hmm. So we need to keep on talking about, to me, gender and disability. It's something that, in my experience, the way I've grown into self-love, your own self-love and my own perspective and maturity and understanding and deconstructing all of those thoughts that you have and the way you learn. To me, it was by being next to other women with disabilities and their experiences with their own stories. So that's what I've been doing to this day. And we've been pushing the issue, and we raise our voices through reports that we give to the UN, but at the same time we create content, at the same time we create platforms. we create these tribes in different states in Mexico to see, okay, where are these women with disabilities? Okay, we talk about them a lot, but where are they? Do they all have access to internet? Can they all, put their words in a Facebook group and talk about it? Like, where are they? And where are especially the most marginalized women with disabilities in this country, especially Afro-Mexican women with disabilities, especially indigenous or originary groups in Mexico who have disabilities. Where are trans women with disabilities? Where are they? We need to speak to them. We need to listen to them. We need to create the tribes and find ourselves. So to me, it has been a process around understanding that and being able to listen. I think it's one of the most important things is to listen, because we will always talk from our experience, right? And we will always talk about what we learn. But if we have even the slightest tiny privilege or decision making, even the slightest tiniest, we can open doors for a lot of people who haven't. Not because it's our responsibility, but in my case, because I chose to do so. And the moment that I say, that's it, that's it. But it's been amazing to understand the collectiveness, the collective, same feeling collectively that we all live, and the things that intersect us. So it's been a long journey. To me, I've been having a disability for around 21 years of my life now, and experiencing the world that way. And also listening to women from other parts of the world, even in the feminist movement. Sometimes we are the forgotten sisters. We're not even, when we talk about diversity, the last thing that we talk about is disability. And we talk about, and we never make sure that everything is accessible. Our videos, our meetings, I've seen some feminists that criticize women in general for not putting their bodies on the line, right, on marches, because we need that, to put your body right there. And I told them, like, well, not all women with disabilities could put their bodies there. And it's
exactly.
It doesn't make us less feminist, or it doesn't make us less interested in this subject. It's just that we have got to understand that that us women with disabilities, we're also women. And it's important, right? And also opening the door to everybody that's, that's part of the trans community or non-binary, because in the end they're in limbo, right? They're just like, we need to also listen to those stories and the particular experiences that they live, and how we link them to our feminist movements, or how we link them to our gender equality movements as well, within the vision of disability. And to me, that's very important. It's something that I will keep pushing as long as I decide to. But I think it's something that we need to raise more our voices and be more vocal about it. Not literally, but yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And I love the work that you're doing with your organization, Mexican Women with Disabilities. And I love that you are pushing for every state in Mexico to have disabled women as leaders. I feel like definitely as women, we're brought up to, although society is progressing, like we talked about, we're definitely as women globally brought up to not want to seek leadership. And I just love the fact that you are trying to have women aspire to those roles. So if you can tell us more about the work that you're doing to cultivate disabled women leaders in Mexico, I would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, so thank you. So in Mexican Women with Disabilities, we're a nonprofit organization. We're all volunteers, basically. We're not sustainable yet. But what we do is three things. The first one is creating tribes and creating networks of women with disabilities. Through our Facebook groups, through different networks, so that we can identify them in different states. And when we link to other organizations that have different, workshops, or we can, they're like this, I don't know, opportunities for them to be in a position of leadership, or to, even in political spaces, or whatever spaces they are, not necessarily, in government. We can download this information to them. We can push that information. We can identify them. We can, just be together and talk about issues and not feel alone in this world altogether. The second thing that we do, we create content, and we, through our platforms, through our storytelling, and we create content. We have a platform that we call Disability Talks, and we talk about issues from the perspective of women with disabilities. And it has been amazing, because we've been able to talk about things that they weren't talked about before on content, right? And and it has been great. And then the third one, we do everything that has to do with political incidents, right? Political advocacy. We've been working closely with the Senate to, for example, in this case, change this law that is designed to prevent violence for women, but it didn't include disability, and it didn't include interculturality, right? And we're like, well, this law cannot pass, this bill cannot pass, and we're like pushing that forward as organizations, and at the same time, we're creating, these different reports that we're, collaborating with human rights here in Mexico or the United Nations. So we're doing all that, like these three pieces of work. But I think the most important one will always be the creating networks of women with disabilities, because the moment we identify ourselves and we find ourselves and we see our power, then that's the way everything changes, and they see us, right? And they see us, and we open doors. There's this a beautiful quote I've always loved since I was a little girl. I love Frida Kahlo. There's something mesmerizing about her.
Yes.
She lived in Mexico City, and I've been to her home like 3-4 times, and I love her, and I identify with her eventually after I had my disability, because of our broken spines and everything that she felt and how broken she felt, and it was amazing. And there's this one letter that she wrote one time. I'm not gonna exactly say it that way. It was something around a quote that she said. There was this one time that I felt really lonely and really broken, and I thought that's the way I was going to feel forever in my life. And then I stopped and I realized that, what if there's someone in the world that feels as broken as me, and as like, and feels so much like I do? And then she says, if you are reading this right now that I'm writing, I have to tell you that you're not the only one, and you're not alone. And if you feel as broken as me, then we're together, and you're not alone, and we're broken together. And to me, it's one of the most beautiful quotes I've read and I've seen, because to me it's just like, there's this woman that I've never met in my life, right? I just admire her work so much, and her life, and she's very intense in every single way. But how amazing it is to connect with another woman, especially what you're going through. Not only the negative parts, but also the beautiful parts of life, or the beautiful parts of being part of a disabled community, right? And to me, it's just like the part of not feeling alone, the part of, this world being so unequal and so not like unjust towards this discriminated groups that we might be part of, historically discriminated. Then how amazing it is to find yourself with someone and to see yourself in a little bit of piece of someone else. And to me, that has been powerful in the way that I work and that I push towards, our activism or our advocacy, is understanding that, yeah, I will tell my story and I will tell my perspective, but I have like all this historical people who opened the way, and all this, my sisters behind me, right? Or not behind me, but beside me, right? That's how I feel it. And to me, that's very important. That's what helped me and has been helping me, and the way that I see it with other women with disabilities in Mexico, to understand the power that we have by ourselves, but also collectively.
I love that. I love it. I love all the work that you're doing. It's amazing. What advice would you give to other women with disabilities, especially women of color who maybe are aspiring to attain leadership positions or a sense of community, but they're experiencing sexism and ableism and are maybe feeling discouraged? What would you tell them?
I would say keep pushing, and also keep pushing, but not on your own. I mean, do the work that you have to do on your own, but make sure that you have the stripes, that you're part of this community. I think when we're part of this collectiveness, it creates like this political pressure on organizations, on government. So we have to find ourselves, give us strength together, and say, I'm here, but I'm also part of this community. And that changes, I think that changes everything. And also I would say, keep telling your stories. It doesn't matter where, if it's if you have 100 followers on Instagram, if you have 4, or you tell your story to your family, to your friends, or if you have a huge platform and you're, I don't know, as big as Beyonce, I don't know, like, right? Just keep telling your story, because I do believe storytelling changes the world. And especially when it comes to people who haven't been able to tell our stories, especially, women with disabilities who are of color. Like, we know this. It's something that it has to keep on happening, because then it will happen how we started this conversation. They will tell our stories without us. They will we will be invisible, to a lot of groups. And we need to keep on pushing. Also, we're not alone. We're all in this together as women, and with women with disabilities, and we find ourselves. And I think that's so valuable. And in this life, I don't know if we'll come back in some other kind of way or in another life, but in this one particularly, it's amazing. To me, it has been amazing to find other women that inspire me because of who they are, because of, how they manage to live, to do life, and not because of their disability precisely, but because of their essence, because of who they are. And I think that's key as mentorship for us to keep on pushing.
And what advice would you give to television, people who work in executive positions in television, film, and the media, as to why they should include people with disabilities? What would you tell them?
I would say, first of all, listen. I think, a good leader knows how to listen. And if this is a business, then keep on listening, because there is a big business around the stories that have not been told and that you can tell, and they will definitely be successful. And also, it's not about only social responsibility, or because it's diversity and inclusion is the good, right thing to do. It's a strategic thing to do, and it's an organic thing to do, because the world is diverse. And as we said, we're 1/4 of the population in the world. Why are you not telling the stories? And there are stories that could sell, and there are stories that could reach to other people. And sometimes they tend to think that disabled stories will only touch disabled people, right? Or if we tell stories about Black people, they will only, touch Black people, and they will be made for Black people. Not necessarily, right? And LGBT, like, they tend to think that they're like these boxes, right? And no, it doesn't. Like, for us as user experience, as in the user experience, with our diversity, no, it doesn't. It touches a lot of people, but it's imperative to tell these stories, not only because of representation and it's the right thing to do, but because it's a big business opportunity, and because it is an opportunity and it's a responsibility to transform the world and to change the world through stories. And I think that's the role. That's what they get paid for. That's how, that's where their talents reside. Then open that box that nobody wants to really open, and they're afraid of, and make us part of that process.
Absolutely. 1.3 billion. That's a pretty big number. That's a pretty big audience to reach. And even if you're not included in that 1.3 billion, disability intersects every single one of our lives. Maybe our family members, our friends, we all know someone and love someone who has a disability. So, I mean, it's high time for sure for us, for people with disabilities to be included 100%. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting today. I so enjoyed this conversation so much. Where can our audience keep up with you and all the amazing work that you're doing?
No, thank you, Ashley. This has been an amazing conversation, and let's keep on talking. They can find me you can find Mexicanas con Discapacidad, Mexican Women with Disabilities. You will find them on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And you can find me and Maryangel __ in Twitter, and Maryangel _GRG at Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really did.
Thank you so much. And let's keep doing things together.
For sure. Yet another great conversation. Dare I say, one of my favorites that I've had on this podcast, although all of our guests have been absolutely exceptional, but Maryangel really honed in on the idea that people with disabilities deserve to have accurate, nuanced depictions of them on television, in film, and in the media overall. Movie and TV sets need to be accessible. They need to have people with disabilities in the writer's room, behind the camera, directing, producing, everywhere decisions are being made. She also gave some awesome advice to women with disabilities, and she's doing some awesome, actionable, transformative work with her nonprofit, Mexican Women with Disabilities. So again, just a really all-around trailblazer, such an important voice in the Latinx disability community and really in the global disability community overall. So what an amazing pleasure it was to speak with her. Thank you guys, though, so much for listening to, watching, or reading today's episode. It's time for those famous last words here on What's Up WID. To paraphrase the words of one of our founders, Ed Roberts, we need to get out there and change the old attitudes so we could build forward better. I'll talk to you next time.